Bien, muy buenos días. Vamos a empezar, estamos muy contentos de tenerlos a todos y a todas acá en este segundo encuentro de filantropía familiar organizado por AEF y CEFIS. Quiero dejar con ustedes a María José Naudón. Ella es la decana de la Escuela de Gobierno de la Universidad Orfi Ibáñez. María José, gracias por recibirnos en tu casa.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por estar acá. La Escuela de Gobierno de la Universidad Orfi Ibáñez y el CEFIS, como parte de la escuela, estamos encantados de recibirlos a todos y estamos seguros y ciertos de que es una instancia de la que no solamente van a salir muy buenas ideas para las fundaciones familiares, sino que también ideas que pueden aportar y ayudar a un país que necesita de todos ustedes como actores muy fundamentales. Entonces quiero partir agradeciéndole a todos por estar acá y quiero que pensemos que este segundo encuentro de la filantropía familiar, que está dedicado justamente a la reflexión sobre el legado, el impacto y la innovación de la filantropía intergeneracional, creo que merece una reflexión en sus conceptos, porque cuando hablamos de legado, lo que hablamos es mucho más que una transmisión material, sino que lo que estamos hablando es una transmisión de valores, de conocimientos, de ideales que dejamos para las futuras generaciones. Entonces, hablar de legado creo que necesita hacer una reflexión muy propia, muy profunda de la importancia o la relevancia de lo que estamos haciendo. Cuando uno entrega o genera o propone un legado, lo que hace es entregar un propósito, es entregar una orientación. Y por lo tanto lo que hace es entregar un capital que puede tener o que puede florecer muy relevantemente. Y yo creo que el capital que ustedes tienen es un capital que este país necesita fundamentalmente. Permítanme y perdónenme que yo me dedico a la política, así que lo voy a mirar siempre desde ese lugar. Pero siempre le digo yo a la Emilia y a la Catalina Celay, que están a cargo del CEFIS, que a mí me gusta pensar en las fundaciones como un actor político, en el sentido más propio de la palabra, en el sentido de la política con mayúscula. Es decir, es un actor que se integra, que trabaja, que en cierto sentido toma roles, ¿verdad?, que la sociedad tiene, pero que no están realmente acogidos y que está fundamentalmente trabajando para la cohesión social. Creo, sinceramente, que en este país y en el mundo en que vivimos, la cohesión social, los lazos, los vínculos que podamos establecer entre miembros de la sociedad, no solo la sociedad civil, sino que el Estado, las ONG, las fundaciones, es fundamental para pensar justamente el futuro que viene. O sea, si hay algo que tenemos claro, es que nos estamos enfrentando a un futuro lleno de posibilidades, lleno de innovaciones, pero también muy disruptivo y donde quizá la única claridad que tenemos es que no sabemos muy bien hacia dónde vamos. Y eso que puede parecer de alguna manera agobiante, a mí me parece que es un enorme y un extraordinario desafío, pero que nos obliga, como ustedes están hoy día sentados aquí a pensar, en fórmulas distintas, nuevas, prospectivas, creativas, yo diría también porosas y flexibles, de cómo hacerse cargo de aquello de lo que ustedes trabajan. Creo que es fundamental, la Emilia me contaba hoy día un dato que ustedes van a analizar, me imagino hoy día, que en Chile se ha consolidado fuertemente la acción filantrópica de la filantropía de las empresas familiares. Y que este es además un factor muy distintivo no solamente en Chile, sino que en América Latina. Y creo que eso los tiene que poner a ustedes en una posición de reflexión muy extraordinariamente abierta respecto de la relevancia de ese rol. Y de la relevancia que además la relación intergeneracional tiene. Nosotros en la universidad también hacemos un trabajo intergeneracional. Somos profesores que trabajamos con estudiantes, que a su vez proyectan, ¿verdad?, su futuro en una sociedad distinta. Y desde mi experiencia, yo lo que les puedo decir es que uno tiene dos posibilidades en esa relación. Una, que es querer imponer un modo que ya estaba estructurado, que parecía eficiente, que parecía extraordinariamente bueno, o la otra es abrirse a incorporar a ese modo eficiente una evaluación crítica de cuáles son las cosas que podemos innovar, cambiar o crear distinto. Y creo que dentro de esos valores hay uno que es propio de las fundaciones, propio de la reflexión de ustedes y que yo quiero dejar sobre la mesa hoy día, y que es el de la colaboración. Es decir, nadie, ninguno de ustedes solo, ninguno de nosotros solo puede lograr o puede aportar realmente a la sociedad, sino que sinceramente creo que actores relevantes lo que tienen que hacer es articularse, articular la sociedad civil con las fundaciones, con las ONG, con el Estado, con las universidades, con el conocimiento, y a partir de esa creación conjunta pensar obviamente un futuro distinto. Así que simplemente les agradezco, estoy encantada con el CEFI en nombre de la universidad de que estén en nuestra casa. Ojalá que tengan una jornada enormemente productiva y sepan que todos nosotros tenemos puesto enorme confianza, enorme cariño y enorme valor en lo que ustedes hacen. Así que muchas gracias y muy bienvenidos. Una cosa importante. Me toca darle la palabra a José Francisco Yurasi, que es capellán del Hogar de Cristo, para que pueda también darles hoy día la bienvenida.
Muy buenos días, agradezco mucho la realización de este segundo encuentro de filantropía de la Asociación de Empresas Familiares. Participamos el año pasado, se recordarán algunos de ustedes también aquí, y nos alegra entonces que esta iniciativa continúe. Es motivo de profunda alegría, bueno, primero simplemente encontrarnos y luego también reflexionar juntos acerca de los desafíos que tenemos. El Hogar de Cristo hace algunas semanas cumplió 80 años, entonces tenemos la experiencia dentro, en la casa, de este, por así decirlo, esfuerzo de traspaso intergeneracional, ¿ah? El anterior presidente, José Pablo Arellano, estuvo en el directorio por casi 10 años, después fue presidente. Cuando lo invitaron dijo, pero por supuesto, aquí estuvo mi papá antes que yo. En una forma, digamos, distinta hace 78 años, digamos. Entonces, bueno, también es una manera de honrar lo que él nos transmitió, de estar presente y colaborar aquí. Con Andrés conversábamos hace algunas semanas allá en el Hogar de Cristo precisamente. Bueno, y dentro de las muchas cosas que conversaba, Andrés, tú me decías, ¿cómo hago para traer a mis hijos? ¿Ah? Hay un desafío enorme, estoy tomándome precisamente de esto de lo intergeneracional, para ver cómo es que vamos transmitiendo de generación en generación un cierto espíritu, unos ciertos valores que nos van haciendo mirar, ¿cierto?, con la sabiduría de los que tienen más años, pero también con el entusiasmo, la innovación de los que tienen menos, y ayudarlos a mirar, ¿cierto?, la ciudad y el país con otros ojos. El Hogar de Cristo, que cumplió 80 años, comenzó con un encuentro. Es bien conocida la historia, la recuerdo muy brevemente. Alberto Hurtado, el padre Hurtado, iba caminando medio apurado hacia el lugar donde iba y se encuentra con una persona que estaba tiritando de frío en la calle, se detiene, él le pide una ayuda y tienen una conversación. Y al día siguiente, bueno, y ahí le da una ayuda, en fin, pero queda muy conmovido y desde la compasión, desde lo que brota el encontrarse con alguien que tiene una necesidad y que vive muy cerca de donde él vivía, digamos, ¿no? Y ese encuentro él lo comunica al día siguiente a un grupo de mujeres que estaban participando de una actividad, ¿ah? Y del encuentro y de ese segundo encuentro que comunica el primer encuentro viene un manos a la obra, ¿ah? Manos a la obra, ¿qué podemos hacer? ¿Ah? Yo creo que esa misma experiencia la tenemos todos de distintas maneras, con los dolores y necesidades que vemos a nuestro alrededor, estar con los sentidos abiertos y preguntarnos qué podemos hacer. Quiero creer que también el propósito de filantropía intergeneracional también lo veo como un lugar de encuentro entre distintas generaciones de una misma familia que, bueno, tienen los lazos de sangre, los lazos de la historia común, de haber compartido un montón de cosas, y creo que perfectamente puede ser posible, y lo digo también por experiencia propia, no solo por el Hogar de Cristo, sino por la Fundación Fibra que creamos con mi familia hace algunos años. Es una posibilidad de encontrarnos y de poner por delante un propósito, mirar lo que se necesita alrededor, pero también cada uno poner sus talentos, su experiencia, su formación profesional, el cariño con que queremos hacer las cosas, y se ha transformado realmente en un lugar de encuentro. Entonces creo que también ahí hay algo que quisiera destacar. En momentos en que hay mucho desencuentro en el mundo, en momentos en que hay mucha divergencia en el mundo, la filantropía o tener un propósito común nos puede ayudar a encontrarnos y a converger. Quisiera terminar haciendo una reflexión que es la tensión permanente entre quien, por distintas razones, ¿cierto?, por su esfuerzo, porque lo heredó, tiene un patrimonio. Probablemente el que tenga, aunque sea lo que sea en el bolsillo, digamos, va a venir alguien a pedirle ayuda de la manera que sea, ¿ah? Y tal vez lo más fácil y necesario en algunos casos es hacer un cheque, hacer una transferencia, hacer una donación. Se necesita eso para sostener distintas iniciativas, ¿ah? Pero creo que junto con eso, mucho más importante es intentar promover precisamente encuentros que transformen vida, la vida de la persona que tiene una necesidad, de las comunidades, de los colectivos, de los lugares que tienen una necesidad, pero también la vida del que se acerca y participa de ese encuentro, transformar vida, ¿ah? Y también eso es una tensión, ¿cierto? Hacer un cheque, promover encuentros y que transformen vida. La otra tensión, pensando en filantropía familiar, es crear algo nuevo o más bien sumarse a algo que ya existe. Creo que hay que mantener esa tensión. Yo, por supuesto, que desde el Hogar de Cristo les invito a sumarse a algo que ya existe, que es una iniciativa, pero también, bueno, hay que mantener eso, con la posibilidad de también, de provocando un encuentro, bueno, que eso sea también transformador para las familias, para las distintas generaciones, y pensando particularmente que nuestra ciudad tan grande, ¿cierto?, hace que haya divergencia y que podamos vivir perfectamente desconectados de lo que ocurre alrededor. Bueno, la filantropía y el servicio pueden ser una buena manera de transformar la vida, particularmente estoy pensando en las siguientes generaciones. Así que bueno, muchísimas gracias por este espacio, por la conversación, por los frutos de lo que vamos aquí a compartir, y ojalá que el próximo año nos encontremos en el tercer encuentro de filantropía de AEF y CEFIS. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Pepe. Siempre un agrado que nos hagas estas reflexiones y que nos movilices en términos de generar más filantropía y más espacios de encuentro. Emilia González, directora del CEFIS, también nos va a dar la bienvenida. Y Emilia, muchas gracias por este ya segundo encuentro y recibirnos acá, en tu casa.
Al revés, muchas gracias también a la EF por mantener la alianza, como es una alianza que yo heredé, venía desde el comienzo del CEFIS, así que me da muchas gracias, mucho gusto verlos a todos acá hoy día. Me encanta que esta comunidad sea una comunidad que sigue creciendo, que sigue sumándose más gente. Y hoy me toca el privilegio de presentarles a Michael Moody. Michael Moody es una persona con la que hemos trabajado en distintas instancias desde el centro, pero hoy día está acá con el sombrero que más ha ocupado en su trayectoria académica. Aunque ustedes lo ven con esa cara, Michael lleva más de 30 años trabajando académica y profesionalmente en el mundo de la filantropía. Él tiene una formación inicial de psicólogo, luego cientista social, doctor en sociología, y se desempeña actualmente en la Lilly School of Philanthropy de la Universidad de Indiana como profesor titular de filantropía familiar, ¿ya? Él, durante su trayectoria a lo largo de distintos momentos y en distintos contextos latinoamericanos, pero particularmente en Estados Unidos, ha tenido la oportunidad de conversar con múltiples familias filantrópicas, entender sus motivaciones, ir trabajando en cuáles son sus dinámicas, y el libro que hoy día nos convoca es este libro que se llama Generation Impact, que se los recomiendo a todos, está en todas las versiones, en Kindle, en Audible, en el que les quede más cómodo, pero que habla precisamente de cuáles son los fenómenos de esa integración generacional en la filantropía. Las cosas buenas, las cosas difíciles, procesos distintos de abordaje, y que hoy día va a venir a compartir con todos nosotros ciertas claves para que esa sea una transición exitosa y que permita fortalecer no solamente lo que las fundaciones hacen, sino que también reforzar mucho el por qué lo hacen y el rol que juegan en la sociedad más allá de lo que sirven a la propia familia, ¿ya? Entonces, sin mucho más presentación, les dejo la palabra a Michael. La presentación va a ser en inglés y después vamos a tener al final unos 10 minutos para preguntas y respuestas que vamos a ir mediando, ¿ya? ¿Sí? Sí, en el Linktree encuentran el detalle de la biografía, el detalle también de las presentaciones van a quedar después ahí también, así que escaneen y guarden ese código. Michael, bienvenido.
Buenos días. Lo siento, es más fácil para mí que hablar en inglés, pero entiendo más o menos, si no mucho rápido. In return, I will promise to try to speak slowly as well. But first, to thank you all for bringing me for this. This is my first time in Chile and Santiago, and it's wonderful. It was also wonderful to leave the United States this week. It's a difficult and crazy time. So and thanks particular to CEFIS and AEF for bringing in. And what we're going to talk about today that was in this book, and that is a topic of particular importance around the world to anyone interested in family philanthropy, and that is, where is it going to go as the next generation comes into power, as they take the reins of family foundations, of individual giving, etc. We know a whole lot about previous donors, particularly those that are giving at a high level, that have a family foundation. We've studied them quite a bit over the years, but we don't know that much about the next generation. And in this book, we call this next generation the most significant donors in history. And this is a dramatic statement for someone in an academic place to say. We don't like to make dramatic statements, but this one is justified because it's not that the next generation, the millennials, now Gen Z, particularly those in giving families, or those who are going to have the capacity for significant giving. It's not that they are more generous of their spirit than previous generations, than boomers, or the greatest generation, or other previous older members of their family. It's not that they are willing to give more. It's simply for three reasons. One is they are going to have more resources to give than any generation in history. This is a phenomenon in the United States, of course, but it's a phenomenon around the world. As I've learned more about Chile, it's a phenomenon in Chile that there are simply been historically a concentration of resources, and those are being passed down. I've learned a lot about how you can or cannot pass those down in Chile, the laws about inheritance, et cetera, which are really interesting to me. That means that the next generation are going to have wealth that previous generations have at a scale that they have not had. So they will have more money to give. Second reason, they want to be involved in giving, being a donor, being a member of a family foundation from the beginning of their adult life, much earlier than previous generations. There was an approach often with previous generations where the idea was you make as much money as you can, and then you retire into a life of philanthropy, and people celebrate you. You get to sit on boards, all of that. They don't want to. The next generation generally doesn't want to do that. They want to be involved throughout their life. And third, they are coming into their role as philanthropists at a time when things are very dramatically changing. I know you all work a lot and know very much about impact investing or other B corporations, which I know are in Chile, or other ways that even the ways in which families go about their giving are changing dramatically. And that's the world of using your capital to align with your values and try to achieve what you want to achieve good in the world. That's the world that they are becoming the donors in. They are moving into adulthood and at a time of tremendous change. So those are the reasons why they will be the most significant donors in history. The problem is, again, we don't know that much about them. Not nearly as much as we know about their parents and their grandparents. And so we set out to study this, and that's where this book came from. I just remember the title of Generation Impact. That will become important. So we know when we think of donors or philanthropists. We think of people like, this is Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller or others that you think of as the people who established, and they did, in the previous Gilded Age, during previous time of wealth concentration, they created many of the norms that we work with. The idea of a foundation, the profession of fundraising, the capital campaign, et cetera. All of these were created in this time of innovation of philanthropy. We are currently in another time like that of innovation in philanthropy, but the people doing it are somewhat different, and we have a sense that there's something different happening this time. So this is Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Dr. Priscilla Chan, and when they decided to give their money away, they're giving away 90% of their money rather than passing that along to their children. They didn't create a foundation. They created a for-profit entity called the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is a charitable LLC, LLC being limited liability corporation. So they decided to give all of their money in strategic ways, just like he did, but to do it through a for-profit. And it's not, and in every community in which the next generation is coming into these roles, there's different things like that happening. And so we need to get a handle and understand what is really going on with this next generation. So that's what we did in this work, and that's what I hope we can talk about. We asked a number of people of this rising generation, how are you learning about philanthropy? What do you like about what your parents and grandparents have done with the foundation or with their giving? What do you don't like? What do you want to keep? What do you want to change? And we asked them, where are you learning? From whom are you learning? How do you like to engage with the organizations that you give to, with your recipients? And we did this through a lot of research, including many interviews with these people. And you will see a number of those interviews today. I will talk about a few stories where we asked people to write their story, and we put them in this book. So there are pieces of this book, which is the first person story from the donor themselves. So that's why it's important and what we did to learn about it. But what did we find? Back to the term that I mentioned before, we found that there is tremendous change happening now and coming in the future. Again, using a dramatic term, revolution. But it's so what is it a revolution of? Some people believe it is a revolution of the causes that previous generations wanted to give to education and healthcare, but this generation wants to give to animals, climate change, human rights. We found, in fact, that's not what's most dramatic about changing, that it's not a revolution in the issues of the what you give to. For the most part, the next generation said they want to give to similar things. They still want to give to basic needs and poverty. They want to give to education. They want to give to youth, the arts, healthcare. Yes, there are some issues that they're more interested in, like climate change, but for the most part, it's the same. The second question would be, is it a revolution in the reasons why they give, the revolution in why they give? We found, in fact, no, as you'll see later, they said they give for very similar reasons that previous generations, when we've done research on them, they've said similar reasons. They want to give to organizations that fit their values. They want to give to organizations that they feel are going to make a real difference. These are all the same answers that the baby boomers and the previous generations have given. So it's not a revolution in why, but in fact, what it is a revolution in how. They want to give for similar reasons to many of the same causes, but in a very different way. They want to take more risks, and this is what mostly we're going to talk about. They want to take more risks. They want to try new strategies. They want to give and engage with organizations in much different ways, much more hands-on ways. And so much of what we talk about in this book is the changes that they want to make in how they want to do their philanthropy. And again, those changes matter because they are going to have way more resources than any generation to put toward those new strategies. So that's why we have to know. So what I'm going to talk about today is a list of best practices specifically for families and those who work with families about the changes that are coming with this next generation, how best to engage this coming generation impact. And those best practices, again, are built for those families who want to engage them. And we'll talk about some of the findings and understanding of the research through those best practices. The first is don't wait, start right now. This idea that you want to give your next generation in the families or help families you work with to become involved very early on, to give them the opportunity not just to do their own giving, but to observe your giving, to sit in the side of the boardroom as the foundation makes its discussions, to go with you on a site visit, to look at the consequences of your grant. They significantly want to be involved from a very young age. And in fact, they think of themselves, we talk about them as the next gen, but they think of themselves as now gen. They want to be involved right now. They want to, and they want to be given the opportunity to learn, because when we asked them, how do you learn? They said, first, my own experiences. And then second, observing the experiences of my parents and grandparents. So they want to get out there, do the work, see the work, and then that's going to help them. And they're very proactive about building their own learning and their own identity. So they want to be given those opportunities to do that. One of our illustrations, this woman is Sarah OJ. You can always see the name down here in the right. So Sarah OJ's father was Swiss. I mean, I think he was Arab originally, and she grew up in Geneva. Her father owned Tag Heuer Watches Company and a number of other companies. And she and her siblings, when they were teenagers living in Geneva, her mother was American and she's now moved back to America. Her parents said, we want you to start figuring out how you're going to be philanthropists for the rest of your life. We want to help you figure out what kind of philanthropist you want to be. So here's a bit of money, and here are some consultants philanthropy consultants we've hired, and we want you to go out and try various giving and see what you like. And she said, as a 15-year-old girl, that was the last thing I wanted to do, was to go to an office and meet with a consultant about philanthropy. But she said, I now attribute that experience that I had when I was 15 and with my siblings to making me into what I feel a very confident donor now. And she's now very much involved in, there's an organization called Maverick Collective, which Melinda French Gates is part of, and a number of other wealthy women. You commit to giving $1 million in some way, and then you pick a cause, and you engage deeply with that cause. And so she now does that. She does a number of other things in the philanthropy world. And she says, all of that was made possible. It would have taken me a lot longer to become the philanthropist I am now if I wasn't given at an early age that opportunity to do it. We have other things in the US where people create junior boards on the Family Foundation. And I know these are found in other places in the world as well. So start early. That's the first message. Similar to that, move them from the kids' table early and embrace their role in a multi-generational family. So we heard many complaints from the next generation that they were kept at the kids' table for a very long time, and some families until they were 50. Then you can get a seat on the real board. But you were in the kids' table for a long time. They don't want that. They also, one of the metaphors that they really don't like that we use in this field a lot is the relay race. I looked it up. It was pasar el testigo, right? Pass the baton. We use that metaphor a lot. The idea that and older generations think of it as they're being generous. I have been involved in the family's giving and running things for so long, and it's now my time to pass the baton to the next generation. The next generation they want the baton, but they don't want you to leave, which is how the metaphor works. It's your job is over, you've passed the baton to somebody. They want to be on the field with you in a multi-generational team that has veterans and rookies and values the contribution, just like a sports team would, values the contributions of those new rookies just coming in as much as they value the veterans. So they bring energy, they bring new ideas, and they want to be valued for that in the sense of a multi-generational team, that they have something valuable to contribute, but they also want to learn. Again, remember how proactive they are about wanting to learn. So they want to be set into a mentorship role with older members of the family. I've seen this happen in many of the family foundations I've studied. They often set that up as the next generation. You don't get mentored by your mother or father, it's your aunt or uncle. So you cross the lines because it's easier to be mentored by your uncle than by your father in philanthropy. But they want to be mentored. People think, oh, they just want to take over. They don't want to just take over. They want to be on a team with the older generations. Great illustration is this woman, Catherine Lorenz. Her grandfather, who is the one in the wheelchair, is George Mitchell. George Mitchell was an oilman in Texas who wanted to become more green and environmentally conscious, so he switched to natural gas. And he developed through his company something we now call fracking to get natural gas out. I'm sure you all know all about fracking and how this works. And so he then made a lot of money doing that. And his granddaughter, Catherine, after college was working for a nonprofit in Mexico, in Oaxaca, and was very much involved in leading her life as running a small nonprofit. But they started to bring the family back in to develop the foundation with her grandfather, and she was elected by her cousins to become the president of the foundation and to run it, to be a staff member as well as a board member. And when that happened, she said, I have 3 priorities. I want to continue the legacy of my grandfather. And so she sat down with her grandfather before he passed away and had many, many, many long conversations with him about what his image was, what his legacy would be. 2, I want us to have more impact than we ever had when my grandfather was in charge. And 3, I want everybody in the family to feel like they have a role to play. So she wanted, you could see everything in what I've been talking about, legacy, impact, and multi-generational. And she has continued to build this multi-generational family and engage with that. And she says things like, my grandfather was concerned about his name on the outside of the building. My generation wants to be inside the building, rolling up our sleeves, working with the staff to make sure we achieve impact that way. But it's still perpetuating the legacy, but doing it in a new way. Again, that's the revolution in the strategy that they want. So be multi-generational. Similar to that, show them the impact. One of the things that is the most robust, most common finding we have when talking to people of the next generation of a lot of different types is that they want to see more impact. They don't want to just be, I don't know if you have the same thing in fundraising campaigns here where you have a big thermometer, I don't know the word in Spanish, and you have the campaign, and each time somebody makes a gift, you put a little bit more on the thermometer, and then you're rising to the very top, and then yay, we made our goal. They don't care that we made the goal as much as what is that impact going to have on kids? What is that going to have on the environment or whatever? So they want to see the impact. The problem is they have different ideas from one to the next of what is impact that's meaningful. So for some, it's going on a site visit and seeing the face of the children being helped in the orphanage. For others, it's a spreadsheet of the outcomes data, the metrics that when I first gave my money We agreed we were going to achieve this metric, and now we've achieved it after 10 years. So this is the challenge for families and others, is to figure out how to show them the impact they want to see. But the main thing is to have the conversation. So instead of just having a conversation with them about what are you interested in and how can we give, have the conversation about what do you want to achieve with our giving. If we, in our family, like Catherine did with her family, what's the impact that we want on green energy in Texas, which is what their foundation now gives to? What are the goals we want to achieve through our giving? That's the conversation they want to have. They want to see impact. Next one is related to that, values. So remember, we said their values are not what's changing. This is often a misconception of the next generation, is that they have very different values. And we hear so often from people that I don't want to have the conversation about values because my granddaughter has very different values than I do. We vote for different people. We engage with, I go to church, and she does not go to church anymore. All these, and you think, okay, well, we can't talk about values. But when you talk about values, for the most part, you are going to find shared values. There have been many consultants and others who work with families who find this repeatedly, that the fear that we don't have shared values is much greater than the actual reality of the shared values that you're able to find. And because they want to give from their values as much as older generations do, having this values conversation is very important. And it can establish a much more strong base for this giving together across generations within a foundation, if you can come to an understanding that we vote for different people, but we both believe in compassion, or we both believe in community engagement, or education for children, whatever those values are. So great illustration of this. This is John R. Seidel. He is the oldest grandchild of Ted Turner from CNN and created the United Nations Foundation. He's Ted Turner's and also a major environmentalist funder. He, when John R. and his siblings started to become involved, they said, when we talked to him and he wrote his story for us for the book, he said, I learned from my grandpa Ted and my grandpa Jane, it's Jane Fonda, right, who used to be married to Ted Turner. My grandpa Ted and my grandma Jane and my parents, they taught me why it's important to be a donor, why philanthropy is important. And they taught me why giving for the environment is valuable. He says, but I do it in a different way. And that's the difference. The values are the same. The values are what he learned from the previous generation, but the strategy is what he's developing himself. So he has done a number of things in social entrepreneurship. He's worked for the city of Atlanta on sustainability initiatives. He's worked through businesses and government and other things. He's tried new things rather than, as well as being a trustee of the Turner Foundation as he is now, and other things. So what's carried over the generations is values. What he was grateful for receiving was values, but the strategies and risks taking are what he's trying to do that's new. And related to that, help them find their place in the legacy. You remember I talked about legacy with Catherine. Another misconception is often that the next generation doesn't care about legacy. They want to just put their own imprint on it. They want to make their own name, particularly if they come from a family like the Turners that everybody knows their name. They feel like we have this idea that that legacy is this holding them down. But in fact, they talk about legacy a lot. They talk about the word stewardship and about perpetuating the family. They're very proud in most cases, and I would say nearly all cases, of what their parents and grandparents have been able to achieve. They're very grateful for the opportunity to be invited to carry on the legacy, but they want to do it in a different way. So it's important for them to see how they fit in the legacy And then for them, carrying on the legacy is valuable, but stewarding the legacy for them means making it work better. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I value the legacy, but just as Catherine did with her grandparent, I want to move to doing things better. And that's what a steward of a legacy should do. Pass on to your next generation the legacy you received even better than when you received it. So that's the way they think. And for them, creating more impact is being the best steward of a legacy. You might be able to tell they are constantly going to come up with new ideas. They are always going to come to the family conversation with an idea about risk, new risks we may take, new innovations we may try, and new strategies that the family should pursue. And so the recommendation is to listen to those strategies, because they are very careful. They know very clearly when they are given a seat at the table, they're taken from the kids' table and given a seat at the adults' table, and then they're just told, be quiet, stay there, don't say anything. We needed a millennial from your cousins, and so you're our millennial, but we don't really want you to participate in the adult conversation. They smell that very quickly, as you can imagine. You've probably had this experience. So it doesn't mean that every idea they have is a great idea and needs to be implemented, but they want those ideas to be listened to and perhaps given the opportunity to pursue them. Create a little working group among the cousins to figure out, is this a new thing the foundation should be trying? They love that because it gives them an opportunity to become a leader. It shows that they're being taken seriously and that their ideas are out there. And they recognize that maybe it's not going to work out. So, but sometimes it becomes a very tremendous change in the core of the foundation. So some of you may know this story, but this is Justin Rockefeller. He's a fifth generation of the Rockefeller family. The woman there is his sister, Valerie. And when they took over, the Rockefeller foundations are complicated, but the one that's the main family foundation is called Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And when he became chair as the fifth generation, his sister followed him as chair, they believed very strongly in impact investing. And they said, and Justin writes this in his book for us, he says, I can do way more good in the world by changing how the Rockefeller Brothers Fund endowment is invested than I can ever do with all of the environmental grant making. And they do millions in environmental grant making. He says, I can do more good by changing how we invest. And so they divested of, and this is the greatest fossil fuel fortune in one of the greatest in history, of course, the Rockefeller fortune. They divested of all fossil fuel stocks and investments, and they invested in green energy. And he and his sister were able to change the way the foundation fundamentally invested its money. He now helps other families. There's an organization called impact.org that he started that helps other families figure out philanthropic families, how to change their impact investing strategies. And he does that in his professional life too. But for them, this idea, which was such a radical idea, being taken seriously ended up being something the family now is very proud of. So they really want to come up with new ideas, to innovate. There's another example. This is Daniel Laurie, who is third or fourth generation of the Levi's family, you know, the jeans Levi's. So it's the Haas family based in San Francisco. And he started an organization that in the Bay Area to focus on poverty, where he said, and what he says in what he wrote for the book was, we can't keep doing the same things over and over again and expect different results. We have to try new things. And so that's what it's called, Tipping Point Community, after the Malcolm Gladwell book. And the Tipping Point Community tries new things. It brings together a lot of tech money and a lot of other people from the next generation to try new things to address poverty, something which his family has been trying to address in the San Francisco Bay Area for decades. And he says, let's try something new. That's what they want to be given the opportunity to do. So he had to create a new organization to do it. If they can do it within the family, that's ideal. Okay, a couple of more of these. Help them. I mentioned how they want to be hands-on and how they want to give in different ways and be engaged in organizations in different ways. For them, again, this is a generation that's going to have, you know, this phrase, time, talent, treasure. You heard this, time, talent, treasure, give your time, talent, treasure. It's very common as a way of talking about what do we have to give. People now expand it to time, talent, treasure, ties, testimony, and trust. But the classic was time, talent, treasure. And treasure is money, and they are going to have more treasure to give than any generation. But if you ask them, the most valuable things they have to give are their time and their talent. They, as a generation, have grown up giving time. They've been invited to become volunteers more than previous generations. And so for them, doing good is giving time and talent as much as giving money. And so they want to do that, and they want to do that with other members of the family. So giving the opportunity to give, to be involved across the generations in volunteer activities or serving on boards, being invited to, there's a family in the US that I've worked with, that one of whom used to live in Santiago, the Fry family. They encourage the next generation of the family to go out and get experience in other places. And that experience by being on boards and serving on committees, and then when they then take a role as a trustee of the Family Foundation, they bring so much more experience and confidence from doing that. So great illustration of this. This is a woman named Hannah Quimby. The story is that her mother, Roxanne, was in she was a back to earth hippie in the 70s, 60s and 70s. She was a candle maker, and she would go from art fair to art fair. They lived in the state of Maine, way north. And they had this old junky van that they would drive around, and she'd go from selling her candles, and they didn't have indoor plumbing in their back to the land home in Maine. And they're driving along a country road, and there's a guy, shaggy looking guy on the side of the road, and she picks him up. He was hitchhiking. She picks him up, and it turns out he's a beekeeper, and he's got all sorts of extra wax from bees. And so they come together and they start a relationship, and then they start a company, and that becomes Burt's Bees. So Burt's Bees then becomes this, they got indoor plumbing eventually. They and became a big company, and then they sold the company and created what became the largest family foundation in the state of Maine. And Hannah now runs that. And she, before all of this happened, this was happening when she had become an adult already, she was a deeply engaged as a volunteer before they had a lot of money. And she was very much involved in a lot of environmental nonprofits and others. And so now when she runs the company, she engages in that same kind of activity. She goes out to the organizations, talks to the volunteers, tries to give her own time and understanding, as well as just being, rather than just sending money out the door and staying in her office and not doing anything. Because then that illustrates what we heard many times from many similar people in foundations like this. They value giving time and talent as much as treasure. And then also, again, their ties. The fourth T, time, talent, treasure, now ties. They, as you might have heard or experienced in your own family, they value the networks with their peers, sometimes even more than organizational connections or other connections. They really believe deeply in being connected to and giving with their peers and learning from their peers. If the peer has, we heard this many times, if a peer, a person that doesn't have to be a good friend, but somebody they feel is in their same social network, has a really tremendous experience, or is given a particular role in their family that's really creative, they're going to tell other people in their social network, and that's what they're going to trust as, well, that's how I want to be involved, because this person was able to be brought in by their family in this really interesting way, and that's where I get my information. So they also love giving circles. This woman is Valeda Fullwood. and she's a young business person in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she, along with a number of other African-American young people working in business and as lawyers and other things in Charlotte, created a giving circle called New African-American Philanthropists. And they pool their resources, they collaborate on learning, and for all, it's a way of engaging deeply in the community in ways that they didn't feel they had the opportunity to do otherwise. And so the message for families here is help them find these opportunities. Encourage them, like the family I mentioned, to go out and become part of those peer networks, or even create your own peer networks. If you're in large families, you can create networks of cousins or second cousins or others who talk to each other, who learn together. There's people. I'm old enough to remember Lawrence Welk, who is a very famous TV presenter in my grandparents' age. That was always on TV at my grandpa's house. His family has developed a multi-generational family foundation, and they routinely bring the cousins together to do a project, and the cousins form a little giving circle. And then we see this happen in a lot of family foundations, creating younger next-gen giving circles. So those are the best practices and mostly what we found. My conclusion then for you is a few things, and then I'll talk just briefly about what we were talking about with Chile. One is, there's on the one hand, very good news, because they want to make philanthropy have greater impact, and that has to be a good thing for us. And they are focused on doing that. They don't want to, pass the baton and take the baton and leave the next generation behind. They still care about values. They still care about family legacy, and they are deeply committed to making a difference. That's good. There's also reason for caution, because they are taking risks. They are trying to change things. The most difficult conversations within families now are less about values, that we disagree on the values as we talked about. They're more about risk, new strategy, innovation, new ideas. Those are the challenging parts. And those will cause disruption. It's a revolution, so revolutions can break things. They can cause disruption. And many of them, as Daniel Laurie in the tech world of San Francisco Bay Area is trying to do, they see disruption as a path to progress. And so they want to disrupt, and that affects families. So we have to be careful. So we're optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. But the key is we can't ignore the problem. They are the now generation. They want to be engaged, and families have to figure out how best to engage the next generation within your own family. I'll just say one word about some conversations that we have been having, and what I know is happening as I learn about what's happening in Chile. I think this is just one of the many pieces of data that CEFIS and others are putting out. CEFIS and if you notice, it's compared to other countries in Latin America: Colombia, Mexico, Peru, Argentina, and the number of these are the number of family foundations that have been formed. And look at the difference there. Yes, there's a lot of other foundations being formed in other countries, but there has been, as you all well know, and many of you are part of this, for me, from the outside, is a dramatic statistic, the number of new family foundations being created. What that says to me is that there is a opportunity in Chile to embrace this kind of newly expanded sector of family foundations. This is a moment in this country, from what I can understand so far, in which you are able to embrace and accelerate the development of the family foundation sector, and to think of it as a sector, and multiple family foundations working together, the possibility to collaborate, to bring, because that's also what the next generation really wants, bringing family foundations together, providing opportunities like this for people to learn together. I think it's a very unique moment of tremendous rise in the number of family foundations that allows you to take advantage of all of these things we've talked about that the next generation wants. And I think back to the inheritance laws that I've been learning about, the possibility that they, by definition, those are going to lead to the next generation being able to be engaged in philanthropy. And so setting up the structures and providing the learning opportunities, the engagement opportunities for the next generation in the family foundation and family philanthropy sector that is such a tremendous opportunity right now, I think it's a historical moment, as from what I can tell, for family philanthropy in this country. And I hope this has been helpful to you in thinking about what that might be. And I'm happy then to talk about some questions. So thank you.
Muchas gracias, Michael. Estamos en tiempo, así que vamos a tomar 2 o 3 preguntas. Las tomamos en grupo y vamos manejándola. ¿Alguien tiene algo que comentar, reaccionar o alguna pregunta? Sí, da lo mismo. Podemos hacerlo en español, podemos ir traduciendo, o todo fue clarísimo. Dale, por favor. Como tú prefieras.
Other instances do you see of apart from learning this kind of like an opportunity to bring all these foundations or family foundations together? What other instances or your experience? Because apart from learning and sharing, what other opportunities do you see, like to share between us or to work?
Yeah. First, I would say I wouldn't underestimate that learning is such an important way of doing it, right? So that's most important. Obviously, I say this as an educator, but it is still important. I would say what I've seen in other places, with associations, family business associations and family philanthropy gatherings and networks, is finding opportunities to, for example, picking a particular community challenge, a particular problem in the region, and mobilizing a group of people who are building it. In the US, sometimes we call them affinity networks. But you create, so in the city, in the state that I live, Michigan, you might know that Michigan is surrounded by the Great Lakes, right? Most of 25% of the fresh water in the entire world is in the boundaries around the state that I live in. And protecting the Great Lakes as an environmental problem is something that philanthropy and others are particularly interested in. And so associations have created these networks for collaborating around finding solutions, giving grants, making impact investments to improve the environment of the Great Lakes. And they invited people to come with their ideas and their money and their next generation, and to build a network of working on this particular problem. So I think that's one really useful and often very productive way, because what it also does with the next generation specifically is it says, I'm not just being invited to sit down at a meeting with my uncle and my grandpa and my mom and make a decision about how we're going to give to the same organizations we gave to last year. It's inviting them to say, hey, we're thinking about becoming part of this network working on this particular problem in Santiago. Would you like to be the family representative in that coalition or that collaborative? They love that. So I think that's one idea. Yeah, but learning is always important. Yeah.
¿Alguien más? Acá. Y después Maida. Sí, dale.
So thank you, Michael, for being here. So my question is, imagine that I think it might be the same in the US, like the previous generation, they had another focus or another vision about philanthropy.
Yeah.
So they started a foundation with one focus, and now the next generation, they have like other things in mind, other focus. So in your opinion, like looking at some examples that you might see like in the US, how would you recommend like the new generation and the older generation to work on this change and to integrate in order to build from where the previous generation have gone?
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is for many people the very important question for the family across generations. I will say that one important thing that makes it possible to hope that there's a solution to this is that the older generations want the family foundation to be a source of family unity, family connection, and so they are motivated to talk through potential changes, right? Whereas it may be different in other realms or even family business or others, but this idea, they really want to invite the next generation to feel connected to the family foundation and the family giving, which may go on for generations. And so that helps to have this conversation. But what should the conversation be? I think the point about values is a really important one. So if there's clear disagreement that you see where we want to give, the older generation wanted to give to education and to the nuns in Catholic Church, and the next generation wants to give to animal rescue and climate change. When we say have the values conversation, you have a conversation about why does giving to the Catholic Church matter to you? Why does giving to education matter to you? And it could be, well, I want to give to education because I believe in opportunity, and that's the value that informs it. And I want to give to the Catholic Church because I believe in community, or I believe in living my faith, my values. The next generation might want to give to their organization, to those causes for similar values, but they express them with different causes. Opportunity can come in different, in other ways. And having a well-facilitated, open conversation around values can make those differences in orientation seem less. And simply having the conversation brings people together itself. And we found this from family to family to family, that having this conversation, rather than assuming, well, they want to do things differently, and that's not the way we do that in our family, and so I don't know where we go from here because they're so different than us. Having the conversation, you realize they're not so different. These generations are not so different. And so I think moving the conversation, if you will, up a level from what issues to give to, and moving it up to the level of values and the level of what does this mean for the family. And I think also when the next generation hears why education matters so much, or whatever cause matters so much to the older generation, because they believe in legacy and they welcome the opportunity to be the next leaders of the family giving, that's going to make them more willing to say, okay, well, here's a path towards change, rather than I want to throw out everything we did before and change it. Here's a path toward how we can find, maybe let's look for things that fit both of those, or we can separate the giving and 1/4 or 1/3 of our giving goes to legacy donations, which we often call them in family, those things that grandpa and grandma always gave to. 1/3 goes to an area that we all agree. There's a family foundation I've worked with in the US that decided that it was homeless children. That was the thing that everybody was very different all over the country. But in the town where their family was going to give, it was a Xerox family in Rochester, New York, they said homeless children was what we could all agree on. Third for legacy, third for our shared interests, and then a third for everybody to give to what they want to give. And everybody then finds an opportunity. I think the giving opportunity for matching grants or discretionary giving, I'm sure you all do that in various ways here, but giving the next generation the opportunity to give, especially true if they don't live in the same place or they want to give to a certain organization, giving them the opportunity to do that while also participating in the family giving is another way that happens. So hope that's helpful. Mhm.
Very interesting your presentation. I wonder if this change of how, what do you see the role of technology is for this new generation? And you mentioned the social network, but
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah, I'm not going to have the full answer to that because we really don't know. And I will say that and there's been other research that has found this as well, not just us, that the next generation doesn't necessarily only want to engage in the world or engage with family and through family foundations. Through a device or through technology, which is often a misconception. In fact, one of the reasons they want to be hands-on. Remember, we talked so much about that. They want to be in person, seeing the impact. And for them, seeing a video of what their family accomplished in their giving in this poor community is one thing, but visiting that community and meeting the kids or talking to the mothers who are struggling, that is still very, very valuable. So I think we can easily overestimate how much the next generation believes that it only wants to engage with the world through technology. They also don't like it when they are brought in solely to and assumed to be the tech person of the family. So, you know, they say, I have so much else to give besides just helping grandpa log in to his computer for the meeting, for the family foundation meeting. They'll do it, but yes. But so I think, and I do know that, you know, more families are meeting virtually, and other. So there is the opportunity to have the sorts of conversations we were just talking about when you can't physically be in the same place. Is a technology can help facilitate that, but I think for the most part they want to be in person when they can, and they because for them, that's seeing the impact that their family giving can have. Now, if they want to be, in terms of the giving, I think they believe deeply in the power of technology to move impact along, right? And so they very much want to incorporate giving to things that are going to use technology to create that impact. So they do believe in the power of technology, but their own engagement, they don't want that to only be through technology. Does that help? Yeah.
How do you balance the opportunity and the mission we have versus the responsibility of taking charge of it and the extra load, and not to hinder or obstruct their own self, the potential they have not to live in this structure they need to.
You mean if they want to develop in ways outside of the family foundation and do other things in their own development? Yeah. 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 So I think for the most part, the next generation voices that we heard welcome those opportunities. Even though at 15 she didn't, But on the whole, particularly as they're older, they want to be given the opportunity to given the responsibility. They're hungry for that responsibility. The challenge is, of course, they have other things they have to develop. They are, in many cases, when they are beginning to get their opportunities in the family philanthropy, in the family foundation, it's the same time that they are starting their careers, having young children, all these other ways. And so the challenge is creating very meaningful ways of being involved in the family. So they want it both ways, is the short answer. I think they want to have the opportunity to pursue their own personal development, professional, family, whatever, and their philanthropic development. And they know that it's going to be a difficult balance. And I think what the family can do to help them manage that balance is make sure that the responsibility part is meaningful, that it's not just, tired and, just, and without, and a regular meeting that you have to go to, that you're never invited to talk to, and, or you're supposed to come in and vote, but we're going to tell you how to vote ahead of time because that's how we voted for the last 20 years. That's where the challenge becomes the worst. So they're willing to make a personal sacrifice for that balance of professional development and responsibility if the responsibility part is really meaningful and powerful, because they know eventually I'm going to be the person in charge of that